And daghang salamat for this opportunity that you are giving me to share with you today. I don't claim this as my expertise, but I just would like to share with you today the products of my research, my readings, and my long years of practice on designing and scoring essay tests. Okay, to begin with, I'd like to ask you some questions. First is, when was the last time you used an essay question to assess student performance? Next is, why did you choose an essay item over other forms of assessment? And third, how comfortable did you feel with developing the essay item and scoring student responses? Now, I am pretty sure that the answers to these questions vary from one educator to another. And I have had the opportunity to interview some teachers, and here's what they'll have to say.
When was the last time you used an essay question to assess student performance? The last time I used essay question was last school year for my English classes. Why did you choose an essay item over other forms of assessment? I actually use different forms of assessment, and one of them is the essay item. I use essay questions to assess the student's ability to understand concepts in grammar and literature, and to see how they convey their understanding or their own understanding in written form. How comfortable did you feel with developing the essay item and scoring student responses? It's actually easy to construct essay questions. However, the challenge is in scoring student responses. I had to develop a rubric that breaks down into criteria, or that breaks down evaluation into criteria and shows corresponding values for the quality of each criterion.
The last time I used essay questions was last week when we had our final examination for summer term. Now, what's interesting about essay questions is that they test higher level knowledge, which I find extremely useful and helpful in evaluating student learning. It takes time and effort, however, to make well-constructed essay questions. Also, it's a bit difficult and taxing at times to check essay responses, but I do think overall it's one of the more effective ways in evaluating student learning.
Hello, my name is Jay Maxino. I am an assistant professor at the Department of English and Literature. The last time I used an essay in my examinations was last semester, actually. Because I teach humanities courses, most if not all of them literature, I tend to favor the essay type over other test types. Our course objectives emphasize honing the students' critical thinking skills or higher order thinking skills, and I feel like the essay is more effective at having the student develop his or her ability to formulate and eventually defend arguments and opinions, to more effectively contrast or compare certain points, to analyze, to interpret, and even evaluate the text that we assign them in class. And also, I feel like the essay would not only help them understand these texts, but also understand that these particular themes and narratives in the texts can be found in their own experiences. And it teaches them to be able to effectively respond to that, to how these themes and narratives are consumed in popular media, like Netflix, or even in the community. I am more than at home with making essay questions. However, I acknowledge that these are quite time consuming to assess. So what I usually do is have a set of rubrics ready, or be more specific in terms of what I expect the students to have. Usually this happens by setting a word count or have more specific questions.
So the last time I used an essay question to assess student performance was last school year. That means school year 2019 to 2020. So I chose an essay item over other forms of assessment because it would reveal their level of understanding the lesson, and not only that, it could also help them enhance their communication skills. They could share their ideas, they could organize their thoughts through an essay item. So when it comes to developing the essay item, I'm quite comfortable because we always have the set of competencies that we could go back to just to make sure we are on the right track. However, when it comes to scoring, it's a different story. There's a big possibility that your scoring tool would be vague or unclear. So for me, I always have to double check.
Hello, my
Well, sorry, but there seems to be like an abrupt cut on the video recording of the last teacher that I interviewed. But I was amazed because while I said that, answers to those three questions may vary from one teacher to another. I was amazed at how all four of them had somehow same line of thoughts along the way. But seriously, here are some thoughts on why we resort to giving essay types of tests. You know, educators choose essay questions over other forms of assessment because essay items challenge students to create a response rather than select. Now, some educators also use them because essays have the potential to reveal students' abilities to reason, to create, to analyze, to synthesize, and evaluate, thus giving us really a deep sense of measuring students' understanding. So in short, essay items are used for the advantages they offer. Now, despite though the advantages associated with essay questions, there are also what we call disadvantages. And some of these disadvantages would come in the form of questions like, have you ever labored over the wording of an essay question in an effort to make it clear and precise so that the students know exactly what you expect of them? And have you ever felt the frustration of trying to develop reliable and fair scoring criteria for grading students' responses to essay questions? And this was one of the concerns raised by the last teacher who spoke, and that's my former student, Eldine, who is now a fellow teacher of mine here at the high school. So these are some of the difficulties of using essay types of tests. Okay, so why do we give essay types of tests? Well, there are primarily two purposes. One is to assess students' understanding of and ability to think with subject matter content, while the other one is to assess students' writing abilities. Now, these two purposes are so different in nature that it is best to treat them separately. Now, our discussion today in this webinar will focus on essay questions that assess students' thinking skills. Now, when going through this discussion, it is important to keep this focus in mind and to understand that some of the rules and principles we discuss here may even contradict rules and principles that apply for essay questions that assess students' writing skills. Again, let me reiterate that our focus in this discussion will be using essay questions or essay types of tests to assess understanding of and ability to think with student matter content. Okay, so I hope that at the end of our session, all of us can confidently say that I can understand the key advantages and limitations of essay questions and common misconceptions associated with their use. I can distinguish between learning outcomes that are appropriately assessed by using essay questions and outcomes that are likely to be better assessed by other means. Next, I can evaluate existing essay questions that I may have using criteria of effective essay questions. Next, I can improve poorly written essay questions by using the criteria for effective essay questions. I can construct well-written essay questions that assess given objectives. And finally, I can assess and score essay tests using rubrics. Okay? Now, before we move on, I think it is but fitting for us to revisit the definition of essay question. So what is an essay question? According to psychologist and educator John M. Stolnaker, an essay question is a test item which requires a response composed by the examinee, usually in the form of one or more sentences of a nature that no single response or pattern of responses can be listed as correct, and that the accuracy and quality of which can be judged subjectively only by one skilled or informed in the subject. And that is we, that is us, the teacher, okay? So that's how John M. Stolnaker defines an essay question. Let me just use his definition because his definition also actually yields the following criteria for an essay question. So based on his definition, an essay question must require examinees to compose rather than select a response. Next, an essay question elicits student responses that must consist of more than one sentence. It is unacceptable for a one-sentence response to an essay type of test. Next, an essay question allows different or original responses or pattern of responses. And finally, an essay question requires subjective judgment by a competent specialist. It depends on the judgment of the specialist, and that's the teacher again, who is the expert, the expected expert of his own field, okay, to judge the accuracy and quality of responses. And so, I think we all know very well that multiple choice, matching exercise, true-false items are examples of selected response types of examinations, and that these require students to choose an answer from a list of possibilities. Constructed response type, of course, may come in the form of essay tests that require students to compose their own answer. There are also other types of tests that require students to construct their answers, such as short answer or fill in the blank. However, essay questions are different from these other constructed response items because they require more systematic and in-depth thinking. So an effective essay, therefore, an effective essay question will align with each of the 4 criteria that I mentioned earlier on, based on Stolnaker's definition, and provide students with an indication of the types of thinking and content to use in responding to the essay question. Okay, let's take a look at this example. So, to review the criteria for an effective essay question, let's try to look at example A rather. And let's see, and let's determine if it meets the criteria for an effective essay question. And here's what the question is. List the 7-step path to making ethical decisions. List them in their correct progressive order. Now, let's find out. Does this question require examinees to compose rather than select a response? It's a yes. Does this question elicit student responses that must consist of more than one sentence? Very possible, because they are going to list some steps. Okay? Next, does it allow different or original responses or pattern of responses? What's your take? And finally, does it require subjective judgment by a competent specialist to judge the accuracy and quality of responses? Do you think it really takes an expert in the field to be able to assess students' response when they just list down the seven-step path to making ethical decisions? You know, although the question does require a list of steps, it does not require systematic and complex thinking about the ideas. While some essay questions may serve their purpose in requiring students to list certain ideas, the most effective essay questions require deep and original thinking. Effective essay questions further elicit a depth of thought from students that can only be judged by someone with the appropriate experience and expertise in the content matter. And that's again, the teacher. And thus content expertise is essential for both writing and grading essay questions. Now, next, let's take a look at example B. Okay, example B says, explain in what ways a person's failure to apply step 5 of the 7-step path for making ethical decisions will impact his or her ability to make ethical decisions. Provide an example that illustrates this impact. Now, obviously, this essay question requires examinees to compose rather than select the response. The same question also elicits student responses that must consist of more than one sentence. Third, this test item allows different or original responses or pattern of responses because they are expected to provide an example each, okay? And it's not very likely that they're going to have the same examples unless they're copying each other's work. And then, of course, this test item requires subjective judgment by a competent specialist to judge the accuracy and quality of responses. Not only will the teacher expect the students to name the steps or answer or explain in what ways rather a person's failure to apply step number 5 will impact his or her ability to make decisions. But at the same time, the teacher has to judge whether the example mentioned is really valid or not, or the examples are valid or are connected or are related or not, okay? And so, moving on, let's take a look at some examples. Here's what we will do, okay? For each of the following essay questions, decide whether it matches the definition given for an effective essay question. Now, if the question does not match the definition for an effective essay question, let's try to reconstruct the question in such a way that it matches. Let's just have 2 examples. Number 1, restate the definition for opportunity cost that was provided in class. Do you think this essay question meets the 4 expectations, the 4-way test, if I must say? Okay, so maybe this requires students, of course, to construct a response, okay? But if you look at all the 4 elements or requirements or criteria, this actually does not pass, does not meet all of them, okay? Unless you rewrite the question into something like this. Wait, hold on. Into something like this. Like in your own words, explain what opportunity cost is and provide one example that fits the definition. Now, this is an improved version of the original essay question because it clearly meets all the 4 components now. Okay, so making students add an example to justify their reasoning is a very good strategy for constructing essay questions, in other words, okay? But it's not only limited to giving examples, of course. Let's try another item. Compare and contrast descriptive research and empirical research. Do you think this type of question for an essay test meets all the 4 requirements? Well, of course, you expect rather your students to write their answers, to construct. That's why they compare and contrast. but they might limit their comparing and their contrasting to definitions. Okay, so maybe this is also another question that needs some improvement or some improvement. Like again, when you say compare and contrast descriptive research and empirical research. Cite or similar. Oh, okay, I was misled. I changed this example at the last minute because I wanted to give rather a valid test item. However, because we would like to give our students some sense of direction when they write their answers, we would like to expect the kind of answers that we will have, we can expound by saying, cite their similarities and differences. You will not believe this. We do have some students, even in our high school, that does not clearly get what it means to compare and to contrast. So we can probably add something like a tag, which says, cite their similarities and differences. Okay. So for now, let's just have those two examples. We move on. So again, what is an essay question? What makes an essay question good or valid? They have to meet the 4 requirements that aligns with the definition that we gave earlier on. An essay question requires examinees to compose rather than select a response, elicit student responses that must consist of more than one sentence, allows original responses and response patterns, and requires subjective judgment by a competent specialist to judge the accuracy and quality of student responses. Okay, so what are the advantages of essay tests? We can name some. According to some experienced professionals in the field, essay tests assess higher order or critical thinking skills. Now, essay questions, of course, provide an effective way of assessing complex learning outcomes that cannot be efficiently or effectively assessed by other commonly used paper and pencil assessment procedures. In fact, some of the most complicated thinking processes can only be assessed through essay questions when paper and pencil test is necessary. Next, essay tests evaluate student thinking and reasoning. It's true, essay questions require students to demonstrate their reasoning and thinking skills, which gives teachers the opportunity to detect problems students may have with their reasoning processes. When educators detect problems in student thinking, they can help them, of course, overcome these problems. Third in the list, essay tests also provide authentic experience. Now, constructed responses are closer to real life than selected responses, of course. Problem solving and decision making are vital life competencies. In most cases, these skills require the ability to construct a solution or a decision rather than select a solution or a decision from a limited set of choices or possibilities. That is why essay tests are really more than enough to provide authentic experience for our learners. Now, while there are advantages, there are also some limitations or disadvantages, such as essay tests assess a limited sample of the range of content. Now, due to the time it takes for students to respond to essay questions and for scorers or checkers or graders to score responses, the number of essay questions that can be included in the test is limited. Thus, essay questions necessitate testing a limited sample of the subject matter, thereby reducing content validity. Next, essay tests are difficult and time-consuming to grade. I think this was mentioned, as a matter of fact, by one of the teachers I interviewed earlier on, okay? The issue on grading. Answers to essay questions are likely to be graded less reliably than other types of test questions. and take considerable time to grade. In most cases, test papers pile up due to the demand of time to read and score answers to essay tests. One of the advantages, of course, of essay questions is that they allow students some latitude in formulating their responses. However, this advantage comes at the cost of time spent scoring and reliability in the scoring. Also try to consider that different readers may vary in their grading of the same or similar responses. Well, call it inter-scorer reliability. And one reader, one checker, or one teacher can also vary significantly in his grading consistency depending on many factors. Again, that's what we call inter-scorer reliability. That's another issue of, or limitation rather, of essay types of tests. Third, essay tests provide practice in poor or unpolished writing, not to mention the many erasures along the way. So the way in which students construct their responses to essay questions differs in several ways from real-world writing tasks. Ebel and Frisby, in a study in 1986, point out that the practice that essay tests give in writing may be practiced in bad writing. Hasty, ill-considered, and unpolished. Well, you can't blame the learners. They always race against time whenever they take examinations, most especially when they reach this part, the essay part of the examination. Okay, now along with advantages and limitations, there are also a few misconceptions that I'd like to share with you in this discussion. Number one is, essay tests assess higher order or critical thinking skills regardless of how the responses are written. Now, this is a misconception. An essay question does not automatically assess higher order thinking skills. Essay questions often simply assess recall. I have had experiences of taking essay tests when I was a student, or even as a teacher. I have had a few instances when I found out later on that the test question that I created for an essay type was not, after all, trying to develop or to assess higher order thinking skills, but just some recall. Okay. Also, if the teacher designs an essay question meant to assess higher order thinking, but then scores students' responses in a way that only rewards recall ability, that teacher is not, after all, assessing higher order thinking. Okay, and that's a sad reality, and a reality it is indeed. Okay, let's take a look at these two examples. Example A says, what are the major advantages and limitations of essay questions? Let's say this is the question we ask our learners for an essay test. And example B says, given their advantages and limitations, should an essay question be used to assess students' abilities to create a solution to a problem? In answering this question, provide brief explanations of the major advantages and limitations of essay questions. Clearly state whether or not you think an essay question should be used and explain the reasoning. Now, which essay test assesses higher order or critical thinking skills? We know that example A assesses recall of factual knowledge, whereas example B requires more from the students. It not only requires students to recall facts, but also make an evaluative judgment and to explain the reasoning for their judgment. So I think it's very clear that between the two, example B is a far better essay question. Okay, next. Essay tests are easy to construct. This is another misconception because we know for a fact that there are many things to consider when we construct, again, an essay question. Remember again, the four questions I asked, the four criteria that I mentioned earlier on. So it's not, after all, easy to construct. Well, easy essay questions are easier to construct for some compared to multiple choice, because there is no need to create effective distractors, like as it was mentioned earlier on by Dr. Torres. However, again, that doesn't mean that good essay questions are easy to construct all the time. They may be easier to construct in relative sense, but constructing them still requires a lot of effort and time. It was, as a matter of fact, mentioned by J. Marie earlier on in the interviews. Essay questions that are hastily constructed without much thought and review usually function poorly. Next, it is also a misconception to say that essay tests eliminate the problem of guessing. Okay, studies reveal that the use of essay questions introduces bluffing, another form of guessing. Some students are adept at using various methods of bluffing, like vague generalities or padding around or name dropping, or just to try to add credibility to an otherwise vacuous answer. I remember when I was a student, I did have a classmate, you may also have this classmate, who was fond of inserting something irrelevant, insignificant in the middle of an essay response. Lyrics of a song, the chorus or the entire song perhaps, or some parts of a prayer. And sometimes this classmate of mine would do it just to test the waters, just to test whether our teacher would read the answer or not. I hope that there is not anyone among us here who can relate to that. So again, thus the use of essay questions changes the nature of the guessing that occurs, but does not totally eliminate it. Okay, so those are just, oh, there's another one, I'm sorry. It's also a misconception to say that essay tests benefit all students by placing emphasis on the importance of written communication skills. Now, why is this a misconception? Essay questions challenge students indeed to organize and express ideas and solutions in their own words, thereby giving them a chance to practice written communication skills that will be helpful to them, in future vocational responsibilities. However, the focus on written communication skills is a serious disadvantage for students who have marginal writing skills, but know the subject matter being assessed. To the degree that students who are knowledgeable in the subject obtain low scores because of their inability to write well, the validity of the test scores will be, in other words, diminished. And this is also another sad reality that's happening. We are more often than not tempted to play biases on students who can clearly write good English as against those who may have the best of ideas but are having a struggle with expressing because they have other gifts other than writing good English, speaking good English. Okay, so again, it's a misconception to say that essay tests benefit all students by placing emphasis on the importance of written communication skills. Okay, so when should essay questions be used? That is a very important question to ask. In order for assessment of student learning to accurately represent the degree to which a student has achieved an intended learning outcome, it is essential that the kind of test question used be suitable for testing the intended learning outcome. Now, and so essay questions are generally most suitable for the following purposes. Number one, to assess students' understanding of subject matter content. And number two, to assess students' abilities to reason with their knowledge of a particular subject. And so, generally, we use essay questions for intended learning outcomes that require complex thinking and constructed responses. However, if an intended learning outcome could be assessed either through objective items or essay questions, use essay questions for the following situations. Okay, number one, when your skill in writing objective items is poor, but your resources and time for grading are high, such as when you have small classes or few students in a class, you'll have more time to, read essays and grade them. Or when you have grading assistants. I wish I had a grading assistant in my class because this is usually my struggle, getting done with checking all the pile up of tests, an essay, okay, constructed types of tests. And it is also suggested that we use essay questions when student reasoning, of course, needs to be evaluated. Okay, that's very clear. So here's a little practice on when should essay questions be used. I have here samples of ILOs, or intended learning outcomes, and I'd like you to help me decide whether I should give, or this yields to an objective type of test, or maybe both, or purely essay, okay? So here's one ILO. Analyze the function of humor in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Do you think this ILO is best measured by objective, or essay, or both? Now in this case, I'm a literature teacher myself. I can do both. I can create a test for objective, and I can create a test at the same time for essay, depending, of course, on the question. Okay. But number two, recall the major functions of the human heart. You think this ILO is best tested or evaluated through essay? I guess you'll have to agree with me that this is really good for objective type. How about the next one? Create a solution to economic inequality in the United States. What do you think? All right, this is clearly ideally assessed. This ILO is ideally assessed through essay type of test. How about the next one? Propose a solution for the disposal of batteries that is friendly to users and the environment. What do you think is the best method of assessment or type of assessment for this ILO? Okay, this is most ideal again for an essay, okay? And finally, number 5, predict the outcome of an experiment. So when we ask students to predict the outcome of an experiment, this can be done by multiple choice, A, B, C, D, what's the next outcome? Or in some cases, this may also be measured or assessed through an essay type of test when we make students perhaps explain the outcomes, name the outcomes and the steps, and then name the predicted outcome. And they'll have to justify perhaps why you think that is the next outcome. Okay, so how should essay questions be constructed? That's a more important question now, from what is an essay, when is an essay used, and how should essay questions be constructed? So these are guidelines that are considered helpful to improve existing essay questions and create new ones. Okay, but just hold on a bit. I have messed up with something here, down here. Okay, so number 1, it says, clearly define the intended learning outcome to be assessed by the item. So guideline number 1, clearly define the intended learning outcome to be assessed by the item. Here are examples again of learning outcomes. Students will appreciate the process of cell division. And the other one is, given a chart illustrating the process of cell division, students will compare and contrast each major step in the process. Now, which of the above intended learning outcomes lends itself better to be assessed by an essay question? I bet you would go for letter B, right? You know, specific intended learning outcomes are crucial to designing effective essay questions. Okay, I think I have mentioned that even earlier on. Okay, let's proceed to number 2. Avoid using essay questions for ILOs that are better assessed, of course, with other kinds of assessment. I don't have to explain that, I suppose, okay? Number 3, clearly define and situate the task within a problem situation. Now, what does this mean? With some essay questions, students can feel like they have an infinite supply of lead to write a response. Now, this can happen when the essay question is vague or open to numerous interpretations. Thus, effective essay questions provide students with an indication of the types of thinking and content to use in responding to the essay question. Consider the following ILO. Analyze the impact of America at war on the American economy. It is considered less effective question or essay type of test item when we say, describe the impact of America at war on the American economy. Remember, we are talking here about how to clearly define and situate the task within a problem situation. It is more effective, more purposeful when you say, analyze the impact of America at war on the American economy by describing how different effects of the war work together to influence the economy. Now, how is this considered? Why is this considered more effective? Remember, when we construct essay questions, we must clearly define and situate the task, and that's what the second example is doing exactly, by asking the students to describe how different effects of the war work together to influence the economy. Okay, I hope I have made it clear. Next, number 4, present a reasonable task to students. This may be addressed by clearly setting what to expect from whom and what to write to whom. You know, when defining the task for the essay question, teachers need to make sure that they present a reasonable task to their students. We have to consider our students when we construct. One of the challenges that teachers face in composing essay questions is that because of their extensive experience with the subject matter, they may be tempted to demand unreasonable content expertise from their students. And again, not to mention names, not to mention the university I came from, when I went to in college, I did have some college professors who did ask us questions that were like almost impossible for us to answer. I think my teacher then should have been reminded about principle number 4, to present a reasonable task to students. Again, simply put, it's setting what to expect from whom and what to write to whom. Number 5, the task can be written as a statement or a question. An essay type of test can be given either in the form of a statement or a question, like, how are the processes of increasing production and improving quality in a manufacturing plant similar or different based on cost? Or in the form of an imperative statement, compare and contrast the processes of increasing production and improving quality in a manufacturing plant based on cost. If written as a question, then it must be readily translatable into the form of an imperative statement, just like the example I'm showing up here. But whether essay questions are written as imperative statements or questions, they should be written to align with the ILO, or the intended learning outcome, and in such a way that the task is clear to students. Remember the previous principles I mentioned on how should essay questions be constructed. Okay, next, number 6, specify the relative point value and the approximate time limit in clear directions. So specify the relative point value and the approximate time limit. Okay, so when we construct our essay tests, it is really ideal to specify the relative point value, the point that we allocate for the answers. And I'm going to show that up to you when we talk about rubric in a bit. And also try to consider approximating the time. So we might end up constructing essay types or essay questions that will require students, that will be impossible for students to do within the given time. Number 7, state the criteria for grading. So in order to be able to specify the relative point, we need to state the criteria for grading. Example, you can say something like the content of all your responses to essay questions will be graded in terms of the accuracy, completeness, and relevance of the ideas expressed. And in some cases, especially with language teachers, we may include something like the form of your answer will be evaluated in terms of clarity, organization, correct mechanics, such as spelling and all, and legibility. But please remember, the focus of this discussion is on measuring students' thinking, not writing, okay? Next, now here's an example of a rubric that we may use to evaluate essay test responses. So holistic rubrics, what are they? They are rubrics that describe characteristics of each level of performance for an assignment or activity overall, like when you want to, like characteristics rather of an excellent research paper. When you want to look into the characteristics of an excellent paper, then you may use holistic rubrics. Holistic rubrics are also best used when there is no single correct answer or response, and when the focus is on overall quality, proficiency, or understanding of a specific content or skills. Now, why rubrics? Well, based on experience, rubrics make it easier for teachers to explain to students why they got a grade and what they can do to improve. I'd like to bring to you a sample here, share to you a sample of a holistic rubric that I am using for one of my essay questions, quarter 2, I suppose, grade 9, English grade 9, quarter 2. After students are made to read one of Shakespeare's sonnets, I asked them this question. The sonnet begins with the poet asking whether he must compare thee to a summer's day. If you were to be the person to whom the poet addresses his ideas and feelings in this poem, what do you think makes you and the summer's day comparable? Explain your answer by citing lines from the sonnet that reflect your qualities and characteristics. So here is a sample holistic rubric that I use in my classes. I'd like to begin with level 3, 8 points. I'd like to begin there because when we say level 3, that's satisfactory, all expectations are met. Example, when do I give satisfactory? 8 out of 10. Satisfactory does not necessarily mean perfect. Comprehensive discussion of the topic with adequate justifications. But if students go beyond expectations, like in the case of answers that are highly relevant discussion of the topic with strong and convincing justifications, then that's when I can give a perfect 10. But I'll give 6, level 2, for a weak discussion of the topic without direct justifications. Level 1, 4 points out of 10 for a vague discussion of the topic without any justifications at all. The justification here would come in the form of citing lines from the sonnet that reflect my students' qualities and characteristics. No matter how irrelevant or disconnected their answers are, I don't usually give 0 because I'm talking here about students' understanding, and that's debatable whether or not, that's not advisable in the K-12 context, most especially to give 0 for tests for understanding. But the only time that I give 0 is when the student did not make any attempt at all to discuss or to answer. Okay? So this is an example. Next, use several relatively short essay questions rather than one long one. So remember that only a very limited number of essay questions can be included in a test because of the time required for students to respond to them and the time required for teachers to grade the responses. So I would rather not give a very demanding type of question that demands for very thorough or deep discussion. I would rather break the question into smaller parts, okay? Which leads on to the next one. Avoid the use of optional questions. Oh, I am reminded of my fourth year high school history teacher. The use of optional questions should be avoided for the following reasons. Number one, students may waste time deciding on an option. Two, some questions are likely to be harder to answer than others. And in this case, this could make the comparative assessment of students' abilities unfair. Now, the use of optional questions makes it difficult to evaluate if all students are equally knowledgeable about topics covered in the test, of course. Now, why did I say I was reminded of my fourth year history teacher way back then? Simply because during one examination, it was a quarterly examination. After the multiple choice, the true, false, the matching type and all, you know, the traditional test, the format, essay comes at the end. He had 8 questions for a 1-hour test, but we had no choice. Maybe it was my fault or maybe it was his, because at the bottom, I was painfully walking through or answering the item one by one, the questions one by one. When it was almost time, I was still on item number 6. And I tried to jump onto item number 8 only to discover that the last item says, choose only 3 out of the 8. Was it my fault that I did not read all the questions first before I started answering? Or was it my teacher's fault? There's no point fault finding here, but let us please remind ourselves to avoid the use of optional questions for the following reasons. And finally, improve the essay question through preview and review. Now, since it's not going to give us any pain in our neck to be recycling the same questions semester after semester or school year after school year, it pays to improve the essay question through 2 ways. No? One is by preview before handing out the test to the students. How? Predict student responses. What do we mean by this? Let's try to respond to the question from the perspective of a typical student. Evaluate whether students have the content knowledge and the skills necessary to adequately respond to the question. Next, write a model answer. I know what you're thinking now. What? Are we supposed to write a model answer to our own question? But it pays to do so. Before using a question, write a model answer or model answers, or at least an outline of major points that you expect students to include in their answers. And then number 3 is ask a knowledgeable colleague to critically review the essay question, the model answer even, and the intended learning outcome for alignment. Now, we don't have a problem with this reminder here in junior high school because we do have a subject area coordinator who makes sure that, who approves rather all our test items before giving them to our learners. So again, it doesn't give us any pain in our necks again to just simply have a colleague go over and review for the purpose or for the sake of improving the question. And the other case is improve it by way of review. After receiving the students' responses, it pays to review student responses to the essay questions and find out what are their common challenges, why they were not able to give thorough answer to the questions. There must be something wrong along the way with the way we crafted or composed a question. Okay, so it pays to review again our test item. So finally, here's a checklist that I would like to share to you, which I hope will help you when the next time you prepare essay questions. So number 1, could the item be better assessed with a different kind of assessment? Remember, check first the ILO and ask yourselves, could this item be better assessed with a different kind of assessment? Next, is the essay question aligned with the intended learning outcome? Is the essay question too long, and should it rather be split up into several relatively short essay questions? But you don't have to give all of these several short ones again one time, because you have to consider other things again, like time. Next, does the essay question contain a clear and delimited task and a specific problem situation if necessary? Next, is the question worded and structured in such a way that it will be clear to the students what they are expected to do? Remember, empathy. Let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of our learners once in a while. Is the task presented to students reasonable? Aren't we demanding too much? Okay. Next, do the students know the recommended time for completing their answer? Do the students know how many points the essay is worth? By the way, I forgot to mention this, that every time I give out an essay type of test, or every time the student transitions to the last part of the test, which is usually the essay, I always include in my test paper, in the printing, the rubric for scoring. And in the absence of this, students will complain, "Sir, wala lagi rubric." Somehow they have become accustomed to seeing the rubric so that they know how to attack the question, so to speak. So again, do the students know how many points the essay is worth? Have you avoided the use of optional questions? Remember, my high school teacher. Have you written a model answer or an outline of major points that should be included in the answer? Is the model answer aligned with the intended learning outcome? Again, the magic word here is alignment, and I am sure I've seen the name of Sir Ferdy, Doc Ferdy, lurking around. I'm sure he will nod his head every time I talk about alignment, okay? Next, did you have a person knowledgeable in the subject critically review the essay item for clarity and for alignment with the intended learning outcome and the model answer? Okay, so those are the items in the checklist. I'd like to, this should have been showed up with a bit of a drama, but abruptly I scrolled into the next. So I'd like to end with a reminder, a beautiful reminder from Aristotle, which says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." Mayong hapon, ug dahang salamat sa inyong pagpaminaw. Miss Lisa? I don't hear you, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can anyone hear me? Okay. So again, thank you so much, Mr. Caballo, for that meaningful set of knowledge. So we have come to our open forum. Any one of the participants, you can show your video or share your webcam, if you please. It's up to you. And if you have questions for our speakers, you may just raise your hands, or you can type it in the chat box. Yes. Okay, we already have one. So I hope, yes. Anyone? Okay, Miss Nadia Abisamis.
I'll just use my audio.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
okay.
Regarding Sir Caballo's comment about the difficulty of many of our students with writing their responses to essay questions.
Yes,
This is a very big problem actually in the tertiary level, where we expect them to already know how to effectively communicate through writing. So, but it's a reality, no? So when do we decide, or how do we decide to conduct, say, an oral assessment where they, instead of writing, they explain their answers orally. But when do I decide to do that? Do I give them an option? Or do I do it like one assessment is written and one is oral?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, ma'am. And I think I should have mentioned that along the way as one of the examples. But it's true, but before that, again, it's good that we always go back to the intended learning outcome. So before we decide as to the type of assessment. And it's true, it's really a challenge. It's really a frustrating, experience to have students having a difficulty responding to our tests, no matter how we carefully constructed or composed our test items, and no matter how we carefully allowed ourselves to use the checklist, but still to no avail. In that case, there are also other tests or ILOs that can best be evaluated or assessed, not only by pen or paper, but by performance. So that's another thing that we are going to talk about actually in the next meetings to come when we talk about performance-based assessments. But in some cases, especially if this were the regular face-to-face class, I sometimes encourage my learners, ma'am, to go into collaborative learning, collaborative discussion, because that way they can help each other, augment whatever one is having deficiency with. So I'm talking about the chances of sometimes going through, essay tests that are done with a partner, or done in small groups. I hope I have answered your question now. I think Ma'am Viola wants to say something.
Yes, Ma'am Viola, go ahead, please.
Yes. When do we decide whether we give an essay or oral? Perhaps an oral exam is quite difficult for an online environment. So if you have like 50 students, that would mean listening to 50 types of answers. 50 answers for an oral exam. But if it will be done asynchronously, that would mean not an oral exam, but also a written exam. A written answer for an essay. But that would also mean correcting 50 answers. So that would depend upon the teacher.
Yeah, we hope we have enlightened you, Ma'am Nadia, on that.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So any other questions? Let's see who has raised their hands. Okay, no one has raised their hands yet, but I have here an anonymous question. So it says, is it advisable to use blanks in a multiple choice question? Dr. Viola?
Typically, in a multiple choice, okay. Am I ready? Okay, typically in a multiple choice question, the options are already given. So if you have like 4 options, you're asking the students to select the best answer among the 4 options. If, however, you want to administer an exam with a fill in the blank, then probably that would be another type of examination. So probably you have multiple, true or false, and then the third type would be fill in the blanks.
Okay, yes, thank you so much, ma'am. That clarifies things. So I have here a question from one of our participants. Okay, just for a moment. Okay. It's from Miss Ivory Diane Amancio. She says, good afternoon, everyone, and to our speakers. I would like to ask, if it is valid for a good evaluation to formulate an essay question and have the model answers be given in a multiple choice with the respected points. What advice can you share regarding this experience? Thank you.
Sir
what-
Caballo? You muted yourself, Sir Caballo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I was trying to review the question. I would like to ask if it is valid for a good evaluation to formulate an essay question and have the model answers be given in a multiple choice with respected points. May I wish I could interact with Miss Ivory so I could make some clarifications. Whatever she means by formulating an essay question and have the model answers given in a multiple choice. Because an essay quest type of test is totally different in nature from a multiple choice type of test. And you don't normally give out choices in an essay type of test. That's why, Doc Biola, what's your take on this, ma'am?
I think that the person who asked the question said that he or she experienced that somehow in the past. Did you say that?
Mm,
And anyway, I thought I heard that a teacher before did that in the class, like giving the question or the model answer in the multiple type of exam. Now, if, for example, the teacher does that, place the model answer in the multiple choice type, that would be like giving clues to the answer of the essay. So, in fact, as teachers, we need to ensure that not one type of your question in the entire exam would give clues to the other types of questions. So none of your questions should be repeated in other forms.
okay.
And I think I've also experienced that one teacher stated this in the true or false, and then another question was given in
The
another
multiple
type.
choice, yes.
Yeah, multiple choice. So they kind of like overlap.
Overlap,
So I
yes.
already have a clue to the answer. So I
Yes.
think that's one of the things that we need to check.
Yeah, I did. If I may add to that, I did experience this a lot of times as a student that as I come across a test item at the bottom part, I have read this somewhere on top. So that's when I go back and then that's when I realize that it was also mentioned in another type of test, the same competency measured, repeated. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, I hope that we have helped or have enlightened Ma'am Ivory on that.
Yes, Ma'am Ivory, you can just type in your response to their
I see. She doesn't have a
responses.
microphone.
Yes, she does not have a microphone for the moment. Yes, thank you so much, Sir Caballo
Just-
and Dr. Viola for that answer. So I have here another question. So since we are going to use Soul in setting up our quizzes, can you suggest like a time limit for a multiple choice type of question and for the short and extended essay? So what time limit do you suggest for each of those?
If I may begin, Ma'am Viola,
Yeah, sure.
I am currently using Soul in the high school now. I'm one of the teachers for the BEAM program, and I think there's no issue on limiting the number of test items considering time because for as long as you feel that as a teacher, this number of items are more than enough to measure already mastery of a competency, then go ahead for as long. And there's not going to be a problem with time in this new modality now because, for instance, tomorrow is a synchronous meeting for our students. So that's when we give them the entire time to work on tasks or to do formative assessments. And we don't just limit, the good thing about the SOL, what do you call this, infrastructure now is that you can set the time, you can program the time, you can give the students an hour to do that or an entire day to do that, or most of the time if a task is given on a Thursday or a Friday, for instance, we always say you have until 11:59 p.m. tomorrow, Saturday, to complete your answers. However, there's only one attempt, so the moment you start answering, you have to finish. But they can do it like for a long time, longer than they have than in the actual classroom. Yes.
And in the case of a multiple choice question, type of question, I think that it varies. Like, for example, if you're going to test the remembering and understanding cognitive levels of the students, then I think that they need to answer the questions as fast as they could, as quickly as they could, because it's just a test of could they recall, could they remember this and that. However, if your multiple type of question calls for an analytic cognitive level, you know, if they need to analyze and evaluate, then probably that requires a longer time. And by the way, for the succeeding webinar, I'm going to discuss about formulating MCQs for higher order thinking. So yeah, it takes a longer time to answer that.
Just as it takes a longer time to construct the type of item map, right?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a comment from a good friend of mine, Ma'am Renee Paalan. Have you seen that, Ma'am Lise?
Let me check on that also.
In laboratory classes.
Yeah.
So she mentioned this in laboratory classes. Oral exams were practiced in a group of 4 students. Yeah, collaboration. It was a very productive experience for both students and teacher, as I was able to give response to their answers and provide suggestions to improve the student answer. This time is time consuming though. Okay, so yeah, that's one good thing about collaboration, and that's one of the skills that we really need to develop at our level in the junior high school here. Yeah, a while ago, I was a bit moved aback when Ma'am Nadia mentioned about how frustrating it is to have students in the college, the tertiary level, who are having much struggle in writing. I'm an English teacher myself. I felt like, oops, where did I fail? We'll do better. We'll do better. Okay, but anyways, one of the 21st century skills that we need to develop among our learners is that of this collaboration. So, and that's one good thing about collaboration, especially if collaborative activities are well designed and that when students are supervised as they do it from our level in the junior high school. Yeah. Thank you, Ma'am Renee, for sharing that experience.
Thank you so much. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Piola?
Yeah, I think that's it. But anyway, since they mentioned about group work or collaborative learning, I would like to mention that on Friday, I will be talking about group work assessment. So I hope that would be interesting enough for others to join this webinar. That will be on Friday.
Yes, thank you. So I see here that some from the chemistry department would like to raise some questions. Yes, ma'am, you can go ahead. Let's have Ma'am Velano, please. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'd love to see them.
Yes, go ahead, Ma'am Concepcion.
I am Mrs. Siliero.
Oh, sorry. Ma'am Siliero, yes.
Hi, ma'am.
Go ahead, Ma'am Siliero.
I'd like to address this to Sir Rene.
Hi, ma'am.
Sir Rene Caballo.
Yes,
Sir,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
thank you for the lots of information that you have given us regarding essay writing questions or essay questions.
Yes, ma'am.
That portion regarding optional questions,
Yes, ma'am.
I mentioned that at times it would be unfair, especially that in your case, the question, the statement that says that to choose only 3 out of the 8 questions was written at the last number.
Yes,
However, my question would be, what if that instruction to choose only
Displays.
three out of those 8 questions would be written at the start or at the direction of the test? Would it still be a no? Because for me, it would be good to give essay questions. However, it's not advisable to give a lot of essay
Yes,
questions,
ma'am.
doing the time element, of course.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
that would be also a good test on our students if a lot of them have different, I'll say, on different areas, a lot have known about them.
Yes,
Well, although they only have to choose 3. So
3.
I would not say that it would really be absolute that it's a no, but rather it would be advisable to have also optional questions. So is
Right.
it? So that's my my understanding. So sir,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. What if the instructions were found at the start of, before item number 1? Would it be ideal to give optional questions now? So for me to answer that, ma'am, because I understand you also were able, you also raised some very good points about providing optional questions. But let me go back to the principles behind that provision on why we must avoid the use of optional questions. Again, well, indeed, students may waste time deciding on an option, which among the 8, which 3 among the 8, no? But other than that, some questions, again, are likely to be harder to answer than the others. And if I were a student, I might choose the less difficult items. And what if my classmates would opt for the other ones that are actually much more complicated? Now, would that be fair from our end to assess learners' responses to easy questions or less challenging questions compared to more challenging questions? And then another reason is that the use of optional questions, again, makes it difficult to evaluate if all students are equally knowledgeable about topics covered in the test. Okay. So my take, ma'am, is still, I haven't really actually tried providing ever since optional essay types or essay questions so far. But again, I was also moved aback when you said that, what if the instructions is mentioned at the very start of the test? My take, ma'am, is I'm sorry, I still would not provide optional questions. So probably I would ask these other questions during another occasion for another round of essay tests. If I really would like to give all of these 8 rather than have students choose 3 out of the 8. I hope, Ma'am Ciliero, I have made you happy with that, ma'am. I miss you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Hello.
Ma'am Viola, please feel free to, yes, ma'am, comment, ma'am.
So for example, if you're giving an exam and you have like 5 types of questions, so maybe you can move that particular option from the essay into another.
To other,
yeah,
other types of.
Yeah, test 2 or test 3. That is if you really want to test the knowledge or whatever cognitive level of your student.
Yes, ma'am.
That you want from your students. Yes.
Thanks for that, ma'am. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yes. Does anyone have other questions, please, from the chemistry department? Yes, go.
Good afternoon. My
Yes, good
question
afternoon.
for
Hi,
Sir
ma'am Flor.
My
Yes, ma'am
question
Flor.
is for Sir Caballo.
Yes, ma'am, Flor.
Is it always advisable that when we have essay questions, we would have one rubric for each of the question in the test paper, sort of? Rubric.
Well, that would depend, ma'am, on what you are expecting from learners to respond to the question. If, in my case, for example, if my primary objective is to have students justify, for example, going back to the test question a while ago, if it's about literature and it asks students to justify why the author compares the student to an object, then if the next set of questions would also expect the same justifications as to or explaining something, I would, and if my focus is the student's ability to explain or to reason, I would use the same set of rubrics all throughout, ma'am. Because we always would go back to the objective or the goal of the test. If it asks for another skill, then we might not use the same rubric anymore. But generally, for a test for understanding, in the context of junior high school, we use the same template. As a matter of fact, in the English department in the junior high school, from grades 7 to 10, we have somehow institutionalized the use of rubric for understanding types of tests. That's in the context of junior high school, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Is there any other? From the chemistry department still?
Hello, hello, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Ferdinand.
Hi, Sir Ferdy.
Hi, sir. Thank you for that sharing, sir, Rene.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
It's fortunate that I had a webinar yesterday, 2 days, Saturday and Sunday with PAC. Although I understand that we have a, how do you say, non-disclosure contract with the PAC, but I think it's good also to share to Silliman what I learned. No? Regarding the rubric, considering also the condition of our students, we have different modalities, no? Asynchronous, synchronous, and blended. And therefore, if you're going to look at the condition, situation of the students, they have different or varied conditions. So there is a suggestion of having one rubric that's really clear. But at the same time, it might be also good if there is one criterion that could be different, considering the different conditions of the students. That would be, of course, additional work, no, for the faculty to eventually check each student work, especially when it comes to performance-based assessment.
Yes.
So that's one consideration that we learned from the group. Thank you.
May I say something, Ms. Liz? Sir Ferdy, medyo I'm having doubts now about tomorrow or the next day's sessions because I will be sharing to the university, our fellows, our colleagues, things I learned from PAC, and I don't know if I got this right from Sir Dondon and from Lani, that for as long as we share this internally in our organization, we may not be charged for anything against the contract. No? But let me double check that after this webinar. I'm going to call them up and tell them that I'm going to conduct something for Silliman about. But yes, I agree with you, sir, when you mentioned like it's ideal to stick to the use of a common set of rubrics, especially when we talk about performance-based assessments, and that's what we really are going to talk about tomorrow. I wish you could co-present with me, Sir Ferdy, because so that we can have 2 points of view or 2 viewpoints from the point of view of a junior high school trainer and from the point of view of a senior high school trainer all in one. Okay. But thanks, Sir Ferdy, for reminding me. Okay.
Yes. Yes, sir. I'm willing to share what I've learned. As I
Yes,
said, 2 days can be helpful also to the community. So as I said, the contract that we have, the non-disclosure, I think it's also clear that we can use those items only within the university.
Within the organization, yes, sir.
Yes.
Salamat. Okay, sir. By the way, we are going to have our turn this coming Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 4 straight days of training of trainers for the junior high school level, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yes, thank you. Doc Viola, do you have something to add to that?
No, I'm fine. I'm okay.
Okay. Thank you. So let's check if there are others who want to ask their questions. So again, you can just raise your hands. Yes, so let me read the chat box here. So this is from Hinaut. It says good afternoon. Yeah, Ma'am Hinaut. Good afternoon, everyone. I joined this webinar 30 minutes late. I don't know if my question was discussed by the first speaker. So her question is about the Morse type exam, which is similar to a multiple choice question. I am wondering if it is possible to easily construct a Morse type exam in Seoul, since I prefer or I'm used to doing Morse type exam. Yes, who wants to answer that first?
I think the Seoul people should be able to answer that, because her question is about the possibility of conducting a Morse type given our LMS.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we'll see to that. Wait.
I was about to suggest that too.
Are you sure? It's a Morse type of exam. Yes, I'm sorry, but I am not that familiar with the Morse type of exam. Well, maybe we can answer this by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, Ma'am Lise, because I have experience constructing test items in the new LMS. And
yes, sir.
It's not really that user-friendly to me, but there is a wide variety of types of tests that we can construct in this infra or in this LMS.
Yes.
I think it pays to go through the list if there is the Morse type of test there. Okay.
Yeah, so we really need to explore more on the use of the Seoul when it comes to creating tests. Okay.
But there's, I think there's a response from Seoul. Yes, that's possible.
Oh,
Morse type is possible.
Morse type is possible. Yes, but for me personally, I need to explore more on that. So there's also another question. Yeah, I think this is for us by
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Florenda Kabatit. What is your take in the use of test banks? But for me, the test banks are already there, then it's very useful for me. It's fine. And it's also editable. You don't have to, like, if you don't want to use that, how the question is, you can always paraphrase it. So it's editable.
Editable.
Yes, Ma'am, it said, okay, thank you. I wish to be assisted on constructing it in Seoul. We're always here we're always ready to assist you anytime. Yes, is there any other question? Let me check again. I think there's no more. Yes. Oh, by the way, someone told me that Morse code is quite similar to multiple choice type of question. So perhaps we can make use of that. Yes. So before we end, Doc Biola or Sir Caballo, do you have any remarks?
Viola?
Yeah, I just wish to thank everyone who joined this webinar. And I hope that for the succeeding webinars, that would be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Friday, they are going to invite more faculty members to join, especially those who are quite new in, in higher education. So yeah, maybe they can get more tips. Thank you for inviting them.
May I also take this opportunity to thank Doc Biola for the trusted confidence, for having me as her partner in conducting this webinar. Thank you also to Soul, Sir Dave, and the rest of the staff of Soul for this opportunity. This may not be my first webinar, but I have never been this tensed and nervous, addressing the Silliman community, and especially when I was asked a series of questions coming from my friends down there at the chemistry department. I miss you all. Don't ask me any more questions. Hi to all of you down there. Okay, so Floor, the rest of you. Okay, so thank you again to all the participants, especially to those who shared also their insights, their experiences, and those who asked questions. Dahil salamat, and we hope to see you again in the next few days.
Yes, see you again on the next few days. Thank you again, everyone. This is Lisa, your moderator. And oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I forgot. Before we end this session, let me share my screen first, because you have to answer our post-webinar form so that you will be able to receive your certificate.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask if there's any way I can get the post-webinar questions, since I was not able to enter the Zoom app to view the presentation, but I'm just listening to it through Toll Hotline.
Okay, yes, I see. So it is HTTPS, then colon / tinyurl.com
tinyurl.com
tinyurl.com / soul dash web dash web dash
web
yes dash web dash assess yes.
So, HTTPS colon / tinyurl.com / soul web assess.
No, it's soul web assess.
Okay. So I can get the questions here, ma'am, for the assessment.
Yes, for the survey form.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, you're welcome. So that's it for this afternoon. Goodbye, everyone.
So Wednesday, for ako na kasi mabalay na like, I mean, kung paano access question again. Meeting ka sa Wednesday for the class. 2 p.m. home na tayo.